Hey you guys, how's it going? Today I want to talk to you guys about growing potatoes. Now, potatoes is a crop that you can grow pretty much anywhere in the world, even in the winter time for places that would freeze over. It's not going to be a time that potatoes will grow in the winter for you, but you can go ahead and prep them later in the fall to basically store them underground or in your containers until spring comes up. You'll see that they'll get a head start. They'll start popping up as, the eyes would sprout and they'll just kind of grow up that way. However, for those of you who are in a more mild winter climate like I am here in zone 10 in Southern California, I can actually grow these right now. Fall and winter is actually a really great time to plant potatoes here because they actually prefer, a good amount of brightness or sunlight, but they also enjoy a little bit of that cooler weather because out here we grow potatoes generally in the spring, and once the heat comes in, it starts to kind of kill off the plants, and that's when you can harvest them. So in the fall is when we grow our second round of potatoes out here. And like I said, for those of you who are living in places that actually freeze over, you can plant them in once, like in the fall, for these potatoes to store underground, acting as your storage space basically. First of all, I want to show you guys, these are the harvest. Got a few more, the bigger ones that actually just planted, that I will show you guys in a moment how I did it. But basically, I wanted to see how they would do in more shade because I've grown potatoes in full sun and I get great success in the past, and I grew them in full sun in the ground, or even at least part shade, as in growing them under a tree. So I had a pretty decent harvest that way. I was curious about growing potatoes in the shade because a lot of people say that you can grow them in shade or light shade. I thought I'd go ahead and experiment with that. So that's what I did earlier this year, is that I planted these in, supposed to get like morning sun to about noontime. It would get full shade for the rest of the day. However, this being close to the mulberry tree, and you guys, if you've seen my past episodes of the mulberry tree, it grows like crazy, super fast growing. It's just grows so much that it ended up shading a lot of the plants on one side, and then these potatoes ended up not having even early morning sun. It ended up being in full shade, and not even bright full shade. There were a bakha, an Asian, like a taro stem type of a vegetable plant that was grown right next to this, and the leaves are like a heart shape, like an elephant ear plant, so it's really big, and ended up just being like 1 foot above these potato plants. In fact, some of them, when the potatoes were growing tall, these taro stem leaves would touch the top of these plants. It was literally getting shaded out by all the plants around them. So with that being said, this harvest, it's not a whole lot at all, but I was surprised that it actually even gave a few good sized potatoes being in that sort of shade. It's kind of like growing in almost darkness, or growing in 5 a.m. for the entire day. What I've noticed is that planting these 3 varieties, I actually like the blue potatoes the most, not because it's the most beautiful, but it's the most nutritious due to its deep color. So you can either buy seed potatoes to start, or you can get the organic potatoes. Now, sometimes I have seen the ones that does not listed as USDA certified organic, but they would still sprout. So you can check your local farmer's market to get, some potatoes to start your plants off. You can get organic ones, or the grocery store. Sometimes they would have, I think probably even local farmers would have their crops there, their produce there for sale. And so they would sprout actually, because if they're mass produced and they're not organic, usually they're sprayed. And since they came in the 3 different colors, like the red skin ones, the yellow ones, and these blue ones, I went ahead and planted all of them just along that whole full shade area, just to see how they do. The blue ones is obvious that actually did the most, did really well in full shade, in like a 4 a.m. or maybe 5 or 6 a.m. morning kind of a brightness. So not that bright at all. And they still were able to produce, even though not a whole lot of potatoes, but they're actually really good sized blue potatoes, you know, for what they are. So I would say if you're growing in a place that doesn't get a whole lot of light, the blue potato seems to do best in a more shaded area than the other types. So when it comes to growing potatoes, you really want to put them in the most amount of sun as possible. If not, get them in like a part shade area. And if you're gonna have to grow them, absolutely have to grow them in just full shade or just a bright shaded area, I'd say go for the blue potatoes. They really have grown really well, like I said, being in full shade. Potatoes really like the soil to be moist, but also with well drainage. I thought the best way to grow these were in grow bags because it has really good air circulation, but at the same time they will dry out a lot faster than being in a plastic container. So you do have to watering them in really thoroughly, make sure that it gets, you know, deep in into the soil each time you water, and to check your water every time, just kind of dig in with your finger to see a couple inches down if it's still if the soil is still wet or not. If it's really dry or if it's still pretty dry, of course you give it a good watering. Otherwise you can just skip the watering at that time, because the larger the container is, sometimes it may look like it's really dry on top, but if you dig deeper, usually it would be more moist. So that's more of their accurate reading when you check below the surface level. Now I grow these potatoes in potting mix because they like fluffy, well-drained soil. The ones I generally go for are the Fox Farm, Pro Mix, and even Dr. Earth if I can get a hold of those. Those seems to be a little harder to find nowadays for me. So I do use the Dr. Earth fertilizers and, you know, some rock dust, worm castings that I have my own worm bin. The potatoes especially, they like that fluffy soil but also rich. So it's okay to reuse soil, but make sure that they are nice and fluffy, and then you can add some nutrients back in so that you can give it a fresh new start for these potatoes. Now that we're heading to the colder season, I'm going to start growing these potatoes in full sun because, well, you know, as you know, the winter sun is not going to be as strong and as bright as the summertime. So I don't think I can get away with growing these potatoes in full shade in the winter. All right, I got some potatoes here. In this pot, I have already, well, partially prepared this potting mix. I'm basically reusing it from some summer plants that I've been growing out here. So I'm going to reuse this just by kind of freshening it up by adding some fertilizers in, give it a mix, and then we can start planting these potatoes. I believe this is a 10-gallon pot, so you got to make sure that this is really loose in here because this is soil that I'm recycling. Then next I'm just going to add in some fertilizer. This one was sent to me by Climate Guard. I like to just keep it in here so it's really easy for me to you know, pick up and use it whenever I need to. This is a 444 balance fertilizer. Ooh, make sure you don't breathe this air in, it's never good for you. Just mix it in. Actually, I think I'm just gonna put more than that in there because this is a I'm gonna be a little more generous with the amounts because this is soil that I have used before. And then I already added some rock dust in here earlier this year, so I'm not going to add any more. You can if you want to. So you can see how this container has about at least like about 6 inches that I can build up from. So I'm just going to plant these potatoes deep in here and then just pile the soil on top of it, cover it up. So I got 4 of these. like so. And then I'm just gonna randomly throw in the small ones. Then the next step is to fill this up. So there's a couple of options you can do with this. Is that one is that you either wait for these potatoes to sprout these eyes and then grow and then plant them in the soil. That way they would start sprouting, you know, growing a lot faster than just putting one that's not sprouted at all. But if you guys are going through, you know, winter, you're gonna have like a frost, you know, places and like with actual winter that freezes over, it's best to just leave the potatoes, that especially if you already grew them in the previous season. The potatoes are really fresh. Just make sure that the skin does dry out a little bit when you cure them. And so basically it just kind of makes the skin toughen up a bit so it wouldn't cause any issues when you put them in the ground. So you can either wait for them to sprout or not at all, especially if you're basically overwintering in the container or in the ground in places that freezes over. So you just put them without the potatoes that have not sprouted yet in the ground, and then we would put some soil on top of here. I'm putting in about 6 inches of soil here. So it's gonna go all the way up to here. That is one option that I can do, so that I can just, you know, put the 6 inches in. It's in there deep enough, let it do its thing. They're just going to come up when they do. It might take a little longer, but then the trade-off is that I don't have to keep coming back and see that, you know, it's peeking up in the soil and above soil, and then as it grows a little taller, I can put an extra layer of soil on top and let it grow a couple more inches, and then put another inch of soil. It's just a lot of back and forth effort, which is totally fine if you guys choose to go that route. For places that actually, you know, where it gets really cold and it freezes over, you'd want to put at least about 6 inches of soil, you know, 6 or 7, give or take, but not too thin of a layer, because the soil on top is actually going to act as insulation. And then once the ground starts to warm up in the springtime, they'll just come up naturally. Once, you know, they start picking up growing and sprouting, that's when you want to water them more regularly. All right, so let's get going and top off this pot, the soil that the potatoes were growing in, right on top of it. Basically, I'm just gonna cover it for like a good 3 inches. And then once I start seeing them peeking through, I'll add a little more, because winter, in a mild winter climate here, the potatoes actually grow really well out here. Right now I'm actually growing winter potatoes. I'm getting them ready for a fall and a winter growing rather than storing them in the ground right now. Another reason why you want to cover the potatoes at least with, you know, about 3 inches of soil is because you want the potatoes to stay underground. You don't want them to see the light. I'm just gonna go ahead and add a little more of this fertilizer. Work it in a little bit. Right now I'm just gonna give it a really good watering so that I can mulch on top to keep the moisture in. Potatoes generally take about 3 to 4 months to grow, so it's a pretty fast turnaround time. If you guys want to speed up the process even more, you can go ahead and get your potatoes sprouted indoor, especially moving into the cooler season, or just whenever you want to get a head start. You know, you can just leave them out in a cool, bright area. Usually that just means that inside your house, by a windowsill or something. The bright light really helps to encourage these eyes to grow a lot faster than having them covered in darkness. I usually like growing potatoes in an entire piece, but if you want to split them up, that's also possible, especially if you don't have that many potatoes, or if you have like the russet potatoes that are growing so big, you don't need to put that entire one in the ground. You can actually split them into multiple plants, right? So I don't have one to show you right now, but basically, if you want to cut up these potatoes, it is best to wait for them to start growing these eyes so that you'll know exactly where to cut. So let's say that there's like a bunch of eyes here. You want to split this potato. You would just take a knife and just kind of cut a generous chunk of potato, and with each chunk should have the eye attached to it. And then you just keep it in a cool, dry place, or even cool, dry, bright place for it to kind of cure. You want it to have the part that you just cut to dry out before you plant them. Otherwise, you're just going to cause the pieces to rot. And the way you plant them is the part that has the eye poking up, it's going to grow, the plant's going to grow upwards. So you want to just place them vertically down on the ground. So the part with the eye should be pointing to the sky. But if I'm going to plant this without any sprouts, it doesn't matter how I place them. I can just place them laying flat, kind of like how I usually find the potatoes when I'm harvesting them. Or you can actually take a pretty good guess if you really want to be precise about it. I can see just a tiny bit of the eye here, so I'll know that it's going to produce the eye here up this way, so I can plant it vertically like so. So I'm glad I've cut this out to show you guys, because I've never seen what a blue potato looks like on the inside grown in full shade before. It's definitely lacking some color. They actually get really deep purple inside when you grow them in more sun. Especially if you're going for a nutritional factor, you really want to get this color really deep. So definitely grow them in a lot more brightness than I did in the springtime. So I just want to demonstrate how you would cut these out in pieces. Is that you can see these eyes, you would just cut it just like the way I was cutting earlier, just cutting with each piece containing the eye of the potato. Potatoes also do flower, but I do have to warn you, do not eat any parts of the potato plant. So no leaves, no stems, no potato flowers or seeds, but only the potato itself, the tuber. And you only eat them if there is no shades of green in there. You don't want to eat green potatoes. Potatoes are not only easy to grow, but they don't require a lot of space. And when that harvest time comes around, it is so much fun to get your hands in to find these goodies. And then you're able to, pick these really juicy, fresh potatoes right away. You don't even have to cure potatoes, and just take them to the kitchen and cook them up. Even people who don't like vegetables love potatoes, right? I do recommend that you try out growing the blue potatoes though, because they're not only nutritious, but I think they actually do pretty well in the winter time, especially getting into the cooler season. The sun is not going to be as strong, so they're really good. It's a really good time to grow these blue potatoes. So thank you guys. Let me know in the comments down below, what is the crop that you guys love growing year after year? If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and to hit that bell notification button. I'll leave the links of everything that I've mentioned in this video, as well as the materials and supplies that I use in the garden, just in the description box below. If you enjoy my work and you want to give me some support, I really would appreciate it. You can go check out my plant and seed shop at WENDILAND.com. Happy gardening. I shall see you right back here in the next one. Bye.